Hello everyone and welcome to this episode of Watercolor for Beginners. So in today's magical class, I'm going to be sharing with you all of the secrets I know about watercolor paper. So it's really important to understand the difference between all of the different kinds of water paper that exists out there. So we're going to start with why do we need watercolor paper, and I'm going to show you today exactly why. I've brought a piece of office paper, ordinary copy paper, so that you can see exactly what I mean, in contrast with paintings that's already been done on beautiful watercolor paper. Forgive me. Right, so the biggest thing that you need to understand about watercolor paper is that it has been designed to handle the water in watercolor mediums or any kind of art medium that works with water. Because if you use ordinary office paper, you will find that the water stays on the surface, the paper warps and even can tear because it's not been designed to handle a lot of water. And maybe if you've tried watercolor in the past and that was your experience, paper could have been the biggest part of your disappointment in watercolor. So today I'm going to be showing to you or demonstrate to you exactly why you need to invest in the correct equipment and the correct paper, and the better quality you have, the better experience you will have with watercolor as well. So now that we know that the thicker, heavier, possibly 100% cotton that you're going to be working on, that is the correct paper. Now that you understand that little secret, I'm going to be sharing with you a few things that you need to know. So first and foremost, I want to just add, before I get into all of this information, that I did share it with you in the description of this video as well. And before we continue even further on our magical journey into watercolor, I just want to quickly share a little bit about myself as the watercolor wizard. First and foremost, sometimes it might sound to you like I have no idea what I'm saying. And it's simply because I have a few challenges in my personality. I've got some dyslexia going there. I have a little bit of autism in here, and I also have a little bit of ADHD. So some days it's a little bit more sort of activated, especially towards the start of a video when I have to get into character and share with you guys. And there's just so much information floating around in this wizard head of mine that sometimes I can't find the words, or you might find me using the wrong word. It sounds the same as the one that I actually needed to use. But you know what? I've decided long ago to stop editing myself and to stop pretending like that is not my reality, because that sort of changes my whole personality and I can begin to sound a bit like a robot. And that's really not what I want to do. I want to just open up my world and invite you in and empower you to enjoy the magic of watercolor, of painting as a creativity coach. It really is my biggest passion in life, to help people recognize that creativity is inherently part of us all. There's no exception. You might not naturally be drawn to the arts. You might exercise your creativity in solving math problems, or formulating a complex chemical formulation in order to help people heal from something that is making them feel sick. Whatever the problem is, creativity is usually used to resolve it. So just to put that in a little bit of a context box for you guys. But let's get back into the beautiful world of watercolor. So the first thing I want to talk to you about watercolor paper is the weight and the thickness of the paper. Now you can see with this example in front of me how thick this is. It's almost like cardstock. It's really thick. Now compare that with office paper. You can see the difference. The office paper is really smooth. It's really see-through. And although it's strong, it's made to handle print. It's not made to handle water. And I'm going to show it to you guys exactly what I mean. The next thing that is important about watercolor paper is the sizing. I'm going to zoom in here with my camera so that you can see all of these interesting little spaces. It almost looks a little bit like a weave. That's very interesting. So this is what we will refer to as the sizing of the paper, and it will be different on all the different types of watercolor paper and the makes and the brands out there. It's just something that is very special and unique to, each house that produces watercolor paper. But the point of the sizing is to help your watercolor wash to sort of sit in the place where you've painted it. With office paper or paper that's not designed to handle water, the water could just run right off the page and not even soak into the paper. So the sizing is there to help you to sort of capture the water in a little bit of a microscopic puddle and keep the whole sort of wash in place until it can sink into the paper. So that is why there is a sizing. The next thing that you might find interesting to learn is that there are different textures. You get hot press, you get cold press, and you get rough. So I don't have a rough example here, but I do have a hot press example. We painted this yesterday on a hot press paper, and you can see how smooth this paper is. And if you watch this episode again, you'll understand why it soaked into the paper the way that this did. It's because it's a smooth paper and the surfaces of the layers of the paper is very close to each other, and the weight of this paper is maybe not as thick as I thought it was. I'll explain that to you now. But this is a smooth hot press texture, and I find that this smooth hot press texture is sort of best for florals and botanical studies. Something where you want to do very smooth, soft sort of layers on top of each other, and you don't really want any texture to your paper then. So that is what the hot press paper is for, and also it's up to you in the end of the day to decide exactly what sort of type of paper is your favorite to use. I'm just going to grab one of this here. I think this is also a cold press. If I zoom in, you will see that there's beautiful texture on here. And I just want to quickly go to a page. I just want to share something with you guys. I think if I go to this page, then you might be able to see the texture in the paper as well. This was just one of the exercises that I did with one of my other students, and it was interesting to note how the cold press paper gives you a lot more texture. You can see the sizing a little bit more, and it gives interesting little washing textures to the paper. So this, what shall we call this, cold press, is sort of the medium grain or medium texture. And then you get a rough as well. Now a rough paper will have even more texture than this, and the rough paper is favored by artists that does beautiful landscapes where you have a lot more texture. Maybe you've got rocks or you've got the spray of the ocean. And what happens is, if you have your watercolor brush, I'm just going to illustrate to you on this cold press paper basically what makes the rough paper so spectacular. I'm just going to load this little brush of mine with some watercolor. And I'm going to use it just to go over the paper like that. Can you see how it skips the paint, sort of the paint skips over the brush? Trying to get that skip out was challenging. So you can see if I sort of just lightly brush over this page, how the watercolor is skipping areas on the page. And that's what you would notice with a cold press as well as a rough textured paper. So that's really, really cool. So if that's something you like, then it's definitely a kind of paper that you might invest in order to get those beautiful skips. And in application on a painting, for example, you might want to have some sparkles of light reflections on the surface of water, anything like that, or any texture that you want to capture. The paper is going to help you to achieve that effortlessly. So it is something to practice and to utilize in a skillful manner. And it can make life a lot easier, especially if you watch an artist paint a beautiful seascape and you go, how on earth did they manage to get that beautiful sparkle of the water? It was all in the paper. So that's a beautiful secret to know about watercolor paper. Right. Then also watercolor paper is really versatile. You can throw almost anything at it. All of your water mediums can work on watercolor paper. And I actually quite love to paint on watercolor paper, even if I don't use watercolor. I also love to work with gouache. And this is actually, I believe, a combination of gouache and watercolor right here. And you can do acrylics on it. Let's page through this little journal of mine. You can throw acrylics at it, you can throw pencils at it, you can throw acrylics at it, you can throw almost any medium at it. I also like to work with my oil pastel, and sometimes just experiment. Like this one is a gouache painting, 100% gouache, done on watercolor paper. So it's really versatile. You can throw anything at it, especially if you maybe like your art to be framed behind glass, to have that beautiful framed sort of finish. Then you can work on watercolor paper because it's just so versatile. You can throw anything at it. Here I did a little bit of a sort of start up with pencils. Sometimes I just want to play. I don't want to paint something serious. I just want to experiment and give myself just a space to express myself and to just enjoy the magic of watercolor. So I think this was also a watercolor painting that I did, and then I combined it with a little bit of gouache and a little bit of pencil. So that is really beautiful. So you can see this page, I've thrown a lot of water at it. I've added very dark watercolor. If you look at the side, you can see there's multiple layers of watercolor on top of each other. But look at this page. It's still perfectly flat and straight. And that is what a beautiful watercolor paper is going to offer you. Otherwise, all of your paper is going to warp. So let's quickly look at the weight of watercolor paper. And I just want to open the front of this page because the description on this paper, oh no, that's not the front yet. Let's find the front of this journal. It's all in descriptions. All right, here we go. So if you look at your descriptions on your watercolor paper that you buy, make sure that it says watercolor paper. It comes in pads. This is a pad or a journal. It also comes in blocks where all of the paper is pressed together and sealed right around, leaving a little bit of a gap where you can then detach the top page from your pad. But you basically paint on the pad. It's basically stretching the paper on your behalf. And once it's dry, then you can use a tool to remove the top sheet and get it framed and use the next sheet on your pad. Unfortunately, I don't have a pad here today to show you, But the most important thing that I want you to focus on is the information provided on the paper. Above and beyond the size of the paper, this is A4, and how many sheets of paper is in your pad, you are looking at this one. 300 gram is basically the heaviest watercolor paper available out there. So you get it in sort of a number of what is called grams, or it's also written as LB. Let me see a professional one. Here we go. This is let me just take my flame of hope to the side. I don't want to cause a fire. Here is a very good example on professional watercolor paper from Arches, and it will tell you the grain. This is cold pressed, and it tells you the grams. This is 300 GM2 or 140 IB. So although it might have this grams, it's a little bit different in IB. So there's a whole scientific explanation about that I'm not going to get into, but this is what you need to know about your watercolor paper. And I tend to go for the 300 GM paper because it's the thickest, it's the heaviest, and it can handle the most water. So that is basically what you're looking for, but there are lighter varieties as well. So you get a 90 LB, which is great for drawing. So your general drawing or sketching journals in general will be around about 90 LB. Now, 90 LB is not watercolor paper. It's not going to handle a lot of water. It might handle one small light little wash kind of thing, but your paper is going to buckle and warp. Then you get 140 LB. That is when you start to move into watercolor paper sort of genre, the paper that can handle a bit more water. But that's sort of still in the middle of the whole sort of weight of paper. You also get 160 LB, and then, like I said, the 300 LB or 300 gram. That is really what you are aiming for in general, because I think if you're a beginner, you want a paper weight that can handle water to make your experience better and to help you to fall in love with watercolor. Now, in the last 8 years in my world as a watercolor wizard, I must tell you this, I really struggled to get some of the correct materials because I didn't understand all of this information from the beginning. So I started off with incorrect paper and really cheap student grade watercolor and horrible plastic brushes. And I can honestly tell you, it wasn't a nice experience. I watched professional watercolor artists on YouTube and everywhere else on social media, and I always admired how effortless they make it look. And one of the reasons why it is so effortless is to have the correct watercolor paper, beautiful professional watercolor brushes, and very, very good watercolor pigments. And when I started to go into art supply stores, I started to realize, oh my word, the world of watercolor can be a very expensive hobby. And if you go and check out prices, you will understand exactly what I mean. But in recent years, I really find that watercolor has become more accessible to everyone. These watercolor pads, for example, I've bought at a local like crazy store, and the quality of this paper is actually quite incredible. And it's simply because it has all of the cotton weight that you require to have that nice experience at a quarter of the price. Professional watercolor paper like this pad of watercolor paper, I don't even know if I still have the price on here, but I remember importing this via Amazon because I couldn't find it at a local art supply store, and I think I paid in dollars quite a bit for this. That's why I'm keeping it safe. It is so precious. So I really keep my professional watercolor paper for when I want to paint something to sell to a collector or to make money from, because this is expensive watercolor paper. It's not paper that I will use to just practice on and try some washes and see what the ink or the watercolor pigments look like. I will try it on a student grade version of it, but it gives me the same weight of paper, and this is where I play. I'm not scared to use this paper to play with because I know it's affordable. I think I pay 50 Rand or something for a pad like this in South Africa at Newlands, as an example, which is like a crazy store that sells lots of materials for a lot cheaper. So do shop around, because you might just find a cheaper brand that's a little bit more affordable and softer on the pocket, to get a good quality water paper without breaking the bank. In fact, I brought some of my other pads here as well. I do like this size. This is A3 size, and again, this is from Montaro. This is the same sort of student grade watercolor paper. There's only 5 sheets in this pad, but it's 300 gram, and it gives me the perfect watercolor paper to play with. In fact, I see this is a block. So a block would be one of those papers that is sort of sealed, and that's why there is or there are 5 pages here. I'm going to just quickly open this. Let's open it and see. I might have forgotten that I actually have a block that I can show you guys. So let's open this. Yeah, it's always like Christmas when you open new art materials. Let's see. Okay, so it says block, but it is actually just sealed on one side. Now, a professional block would be sealed like this all the way around, but they usually keep a gap in the middle of the block where you can use a tool like this to insert it, and then you tear it off. But this is just sealed on the one side. But this is basically what a block would look like. Now, if I paint on this, I probably would still just use some masking tape around the edges, and I'll speak to you guys and show you guys about that in another episode later. So here's another example of student grade watercolor paper. It is 300 GSM, my favorite weight. It's basically new material, acid free. It's got a backing board, and it's for smooth painting. So this is probably a hot press if it says smooth painting kind of paper. So that's basically the stuff you have to look out for when you are looking at investing in some watercolor paper to get started. So just maybe shop around and see what is available, and then decide on the price if that suits your sort of budget. So there's definitely watercolor for everyone. I've also, over the years, I've used like Timo and Shane and all kinds of other online shopping avenues to purchase my watercolor materials at a very affordable price. And there's some really awesome materials out there. So just shop around and see what you sort of can get. Now, let's get back into this watercolor paper. I've totally dismantled my support system here. I've got another table next to me where I keep sort of things off camera, and there's a whole heap of paper and paint and things next to me here. So let's get into this. So I also wanted to share something else about watercolor paper. A common question is, I would like to paint on canvas. Can I work on canvas with watercolor? And the answer is yes and no. And I think it's pretty clear A canvas is usually very smooth, flat surface that is designed for paint to adhere to. And watercolor is just so runny. So if your canvas is standing up like this, your watercolor will run right off. So you can work on a canvas that's prepped with a few layers of gesso, but you might find that the watercolor lifts if you put water on it again. So if you do watercolor on canvas, I would advise you to seal your layers when you're done before you do anything else to it. But you know what, that's not sort of what it's designed for. So that would be really experimental. But you do get an absorbent ground, and this is from Golden. So this is rather expensive, but it is very effective. So it's basically a gesso. I'm not even going to try and open this thing right now. Let me sip something. Forgive me. It is an absorbent ground, which is like a gesso that you would do a few layers on your canvas and then wait for it to dry. And then you can do watercolor on that, and it will work almost like watercolor paper. It's an absorbent ground, so the watercolor will sink into it. But some of the techniques that you can do on paper, you won't be able to do on that absorbent ground. And you'll find that your watercolor will look even lighter because of that formulation. But, very exciting news, in recent years, I found that they have prepared canvases already for you for watercolor. So if you just shop around in your art supply stores or online, you can find canvases that is already being prepped specifically for watercolor. So if you want to go big and paint on canvas with watercolor, be my guest, because there are a number of canvases that's prepared for you already to do exactly that. So don't let that stop you. If paper is not your thing and you still want to stay with canvas, you can do watercolor on canvas. So that is available. Right, that's very interesting. Now, I think what I'm going to do for you guys, remember this little orchid sort of theme that we've got going here. We're going to do this exercise a number of times. So by the time we get to the end of this watercolor for beginners, you're going to be very confident in painting a simple pot of flowers like this. Right. So I'm going to use my watercolor pencil here, just like I did yesterday. And let's start with the pot. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's really just an exercise so that we can get into it. Now, I know that I'm drawing everything here with a red watercolor pencil. That's okay. You can obviously now, when we get into proper exercises, if you know you're going to have a blue pot and you're going to have a dark shadow and green leaves, you can do it with the correct color. I would suggest that you try doing it with the correct color, and that will just support your sort of experience. But I'm just going to go ahead and do this all with this red, and I'm just giving myself here some flowers to play with. And we've got some leaves going here. Nothing serious. We want to paint loosely. And today I've got here an Art Secret watercolor brush, and I also have a Princeton Aqua Elite round brush number 6. This is sort of, if there's one watercolor brush that you need to invest into, it's like a number 6 round watercolor brush. This is like they call this a number 1. Now let me tell you something about brushes. We'll get into this in the next episode, but the numbering system on brushes is not universal. Every range of brushes number it in their own fashion. So unless you buy that specific brand, like a professional range like Princeton, the number is going to mean not much to you. basically I'm saying to you with a number 6, it's a medium kind of brush size. Right, let's get into this beautiful watercolor painting here. Oh, let me just rinse that little brush. There we go. And we're going to go ahead and do this exactly like I did yesterday. So I remember I had this sort of turquoisey kind of thing color going here. So let's just activate our watercolor paints. And I just use my water aqua mister to just mist my watercolors so that they can basically start to activate the pigment. I did use a little bit of this light blue, a little bit of this green, and we have this turquoisey background. So I'm going to go ahead and do exactly basically what I did yesterday on that other little journal of mine, and we're going to see how this turns out. Right? Exciting! I hope you guys are excited. I am pleasantly surprised with this series of watercolor painting that I'm busy recording, because just launching this watercolor course has already brought some new Patreons into my life, and I'm so grateful for that, because you know what? It's really hard as an artist to sort of support yourself and to keep the rent paid and to buy new art supplies. Like I said, you know how expensive art supplies can get. So I really appreciate all of you guys. So let's do a nice shadow here. And I'm going to do a nice, exciting blue pot here. That feels nice. Let's get into that dark green of mine. So I like to sort of mix dark green with a little bit of black. It just sort of deepens that green pigment a little bit, so it's not so loud. Let's try it a little bit darker. Here we go. And so far you would think, well, that doesn't look too bad, but really, can you see how the paper is warping and puddles are forming, and it's just not looking very professional. Let's put in those little, what do you call them, roots. Right, let's get into our beautiful pink here like we did yesterday. Oh, I'm deliberately throwing a lot of water at it as well, because this is the amount of water that I sometimes want to work with on a bigger sheet of paper, and this is basically the whole experience that I want to show you guys that can happen, and it's very frustrating because there's no sizing on this paper. So what happens is everything is just flowing into a puddle, and the colors is not vibrant, and it's not working for me. So I'm going to try and get back into this previously wet area and just bring in a little bit more color, and let's see what happens. Now, some of you might say, "Akko, but you're not deliberately trying to soak this paper. If you're careful, then it should work, right?" No, it's absolutely not correct. Even if I allow this to dry, which I'm going to do, and I'll show you guys exactly what this paper looks like once it's dry. It's going to take a minute, so I might just hit pause or show you guys a bit later. But yeah, you can see how little rivers is starting to form because the paper is starting to buckle and to crinkle, and it is forming little puddles. And if I pick up this paper, can you see how it's running everywhere? Because there's no sizing. So my watercolor is already not where I placed it to begin with. And in the end, this is just going to look like a puddle of mess. So this is a very good example of why we don't use any paper for watercolor, and we use specifically paper designed to handle water mediums, and that is your watercolor paper. So if you want to be successful in watercolor, then invest in watercolor paper. And like I said, it doesn't have to break the bank. You just have to be smart and look around and see what is available and weigh up your options. And I promise you, if you get into a good 300 GM, then you will have the correct weight of watercolor paper to start on. But if that is too expensive, look for 140 IB at the least. Anything less than 140 will be too light. This is, I think, about 90 or 60 LB. Just to give you an idea, it's just not designed for watercolor. And you can see all the water is seeped through to my plastic in the back, and this is just turning into a mess. So hopefully that was an insightful experimental moment as I shared with you the secret of watercolor paper and how that will empower you on your beautiful craft going ahead. So I'll see you guys tomorrow, and then we'll talk a little bit about watercolor brushes. So for now, stay good, stay kind to yourself, stay creative, and I'll see you guys back here tomorrow. So I'll see you then. Bye bye for now.